Welcome to another broadcast of the Deborah Ruffini Show on the Artist First Radio Network. All past shows are archived. You can find them at artistfirst.com. And now, from England, here she is, your host, Deborah Ruffini.
Greetings from England. This is Deborah Ruffini with another broadcast of the Deborah Ruffini Show. Today it is my privilege to be speaking with Roy Williams. Roy is a retired inspector with the Metropolitan Police who of late is concerned by the nature of policing carried out within the police forces. He is chairman of the Sussex Residents Association, raising awareness of environmental issues which may have a negative impact on people's lives. So Roy, thank you for being with us today. How are you doing?
Oh, not bad, thank you. I'm a bit nervous, I don't know why, but not used to talking on radio and stuff like that. So
that's absolutely
we'll see how it goes, eh?
That's absolutely fine. Yeah, I still get nervous, and I've been doing this for a while, so it's and every broadcast a new one, isn't it? So it's very exciting stuff. Nervous but exciting. It's all
yes,
good.
Exactly. Yeah.
But so to the audience, I wanted to make contact with Roy because in a previous broadcast, I mentioned about my own case of misconduct with the police and being absolutely mind-blown about lying on the reports and no evidence and not being listened to, with things flying in the face of these accusations. And so I really feel for my dear brother here because Roy, as I mentioned in the introduction, has been unfairly treated by your own kind, haven't you?
Yeah. So sorry, you faded out a little bit there, but
oh, that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I suppose I should just tell your listeners a little bit about myself. So,
okay. Yeah.
I'm 64 years old.
Yep.
I'm a retired Metropolitan Police inspector.
Mm.
I retired in 2008.
Okay.
I worked in some of the busiest parts of South London. I spent the last 10 years of my service in Brixton. Mm. The only reason I'm telling you this is just so you get the idea. I'm quite an experienced officer. I spent the majority of my service out on the streets. I've not. Obviously, we all have desk jobs from time to time, but the majority of my service I was out on the streets. After my retirement, I had about a year out, and then I took a job as a policy officer with Sussex Police. Was with them for about 7.5 years. Mm. And then. I had a bit of an unfortunate. It would be fair to say that myself and Sussex Police didn't part on the best of terms. Mm. After I left, I made certain allegations against a number of officers, up to and including the Chief Constable. The Chief Constable then at the time was Sir Giles York. Mm. And I made allegations of crime, which were essentially allegations of perverting the course of justice against about 8 officers, all of DCI or Chief Inspector rank and above. So we're talking about the senior level of management within Sussex Police. Yeah. I went through a disciplinary process in relation to a minor incident, which in honesty was sort of blown up out of all proportion, and was embellished, if I can use that word, by the statements of a couple of people. One was my then supervisor, Inspector Rachel Swinney, and a civilian called Tony Petman, who was a head of a restorative justice department. Now, as a result of what I consider to be lies told by these officers, a disciplinary procedure followed, and basically, the case against me, if you like, was based upon the testimony of a number of witnesses who were very drunk. The case itself, when it was presented, it seemed to be composed of a load of spurious allegations which had just been, if you like, discovered after the event. So basically what they did is they went around speaking to their police colleagues to say, well, did you speak to Roy last night? What did he say? What were you talking about? And as a result of some of these, what were essentially private conversations, arose a number of allegations, about 7 or 8 allegations, which included things like racism, sexual harassment, amongst other things. And so when I saw this array of allegations, I was just dumbfounded, and I just couldn't believe it, because the thing is about the police is that when you work in the police, you get involved with your colleagues with very hairy situations on occasions, and that sort of creates strong bonds between officers, because you've been in almost life-threatening situations on occasions, and there is this sort of camaraderie within the police that perhaps you don't find in other organisations. And there is a tendency on occasions that when a group is under attack, they will sort of close ranks and not grass on each other, if I can use that term. Now, throughout the process that then followed, which was a disciplinary hearing, then an appeal, then a tribunal, and then subsequently, at the end of all that, information came out at the tribunal that allowed me to discover that there were other matters under investigation, allegedly, that had not been disclosed to me. And one of these allegations was that I'd offered to supply a controlled drug to a colleague at work at the headquarters in Lewes, in Sussex. Well,
serious stuff.
You know, it was just essentially office gossip. From an ex-colleague. We used to talk about things, and one day he brought in a book about the X-Files, and there was a little section in there about ayahuasca, and we discussed that, and we discussed psychedelics, we discussed cannabis, and it's clear to me that at some stage this ex-colleague has sort of got it into his head that I've invited him over to my place to smoke drugs. Now, nothing could be further from the truth. We shared a similar taste in music, and I have invited him over for what I call music appreciation. You know, you have a few beers, put a few tracks on, chill out, and it was nothing more than that. But obviously it was very clear to me, that it became clear to me that the investigation officer wasn't interested in any of my challenges to the evidence that was presented in relation to the incident that occurred at this conference. Now, that said, you've got to ask why, because I'm challenging the chronology of the allegations, I'm challenging the substance of it. I'm basically calling two of their star witnesses liars, because I know what they were saying was a lie. And I later, because the investigation officer had not conducted any investigation, I later went to the conference centre myself and found a witness that actually witnessed something that occurred in the foyer the following morning, and in that little exchange between myself and my supervisor, Rachel Swinney, I was basically written up by Swinney and Petman as being this violent, volatile person who they feared for their safety, and they were conscious that they were alone with me, and all this.
Goodness.
And yet when I spoke to the receptionist, I didn't put any words in her mouth. I just did my job as a experienced police officer and took a statement from her and asked her to. Could she recollect what she saw on that morning? And of course, her statement was totally contradictory to the highly corroborated statements of Swinney and Petman. Now, that fact and that evidence was basically totally ignored throughout the whole of the Sussex police process. At no time did the investigation officer contact this witness to take a further statement or to question her about what she saw. I think they just decided, because I had taken the statement, that it had no value. Well, unfortunately, there's rules around investigations, and of course, they had a duty in many ways to go and speak to this witness to establish the truth of the matter. Was it true, or was it a fabrication? Well, the witness was always available throughout the process, and at no time was she spoken to. Now,
absolutely disgusting.
Yeah, well, later on, long story short, but later on, I believe I have sufficient evidence to make allegations of crime, and so what I did, I put together a docket in which I speak about each of the individual players throughout the process, what they did, and how they perverted the course of justice. But unfortunately, as the process continues, the more people try to cover for each other, these offences become compounded. So if one person's told a lie and then somebody tries to cover up for that person, they are also then implicated in perverting the course of justice. And it's and in some senses, it's a very, very simple offence to prove, but it's also insidious, because if you think about the behaviour of the two officers I just mentioned, and my position, I'm in no position, unless I could obtain a witness as I did, or some CCTV, I'm in no position to refute what they're saying. There's two of them saying it against my one, and so the strength of their evidence would be greater than me just sort of feigning my innocence and telling, stating my side of the story. So you can see how malicious and conniving it is, and that's why when people are convicted of these offences, they tend to get quite lengthy sentences, because they're made an example of. There was a case recently, I say recently, a couple of years ago, where a Labour MP, a female black Labour MP, was arrested for perverting the course of justice, and all she had done is, when she was caught by a speed camera, was sent a form asking who was driving at the time of the offence, and she wrote back and put somebody else's name in there. And of course, nowadays there's a picture that can be seen, and she was obviously in the picture, so they could prove her lie. Now, for that, she lost her seat in the Commons, she lost her driving licence, and she also had her right to act as a solicitor removed. She was barred from the whatever they call it, the bar, I suppose. And then, so that's one example. So, but when you look at the behaviour of these officers, they are all implicated to a greater or lesser degree, but they are not. These are not young, inexperienced officers. These are all 8 ranks of chief inspector or above, and including the chief constable. They have no excuse for what happened. They know fully what happened and what they did. Now,
that's scary.
Yeah, it is scary. And the thing is, when I was speaking earlier about the bond between officers, I hope you can sort of see how hard it is for me actually to say some of the things I'm saying.
Yeah.
But I listened to an interview recently with Bill Barr, the Attorney General for when Trump was in office.
Yes.
And he was talking about the Roger Stone case, and I thought it was quite interesting, because basically what he said was that without the rule of law in a democracy, you might as well give up, because and so he was under a lot of political pressure to increase the sentence for Stone to 7 to 9 years, and he fought back on that against a lot of political pressure, on the basis that, well, any person that's arrested, person A, should be treated in exactly the same way as a second person B that's been arrested in the same given circumstances, and that should happen regardless of your political standing, your affiliation to any organisation, and so on. And of course, he made the case that, well, Roger Stone was 67 years old. He was no previous convictions. It was a non-violent offence, and so the short sentence he got was probably more appropriate. And so, when I look at my own case, I suppose in some sense I care about the rule of law, and I care that the law is fair in how it's deliberated. But all of these officers, I don't need to name all of them. It's all well documented in my allegations of crime. They all know what I'm saying, and they all know that they are guilty. That is the most important point, because this case boils down to two questions. So, when I make my allegations of crime at the end of the tribunal, etc., I'm quite specific that about the evidence and the strength of the evidence, and I detail what evidence is under each of the named perpetrators. But they then tell me they're going to refuse to record my allegations of crime, and the reason for that is that because it's only in my opinion that offences are being committed.
Oh, now, my goodness!
That's what they told me in writing. So what I would say about that is, well, with almost 40 years policing experience, I say quite categorically that if I make an allegation of crime and I support it by evidence, I'm pretty clear that there will be sufficient evidence there to, if not charge immediately, certainly for that person to be asked questions about their behaviour.
Yeah, sure.
Now, and they, but I said, well, and I'll accept your decision not to record these allegations of crime if you can answer me in a written answer the rationale for your decision. But that rationale should include the answer to two questions. The first question is, was there a course of justice in progress? And the second question is there evidence that officers told lies in their statements?
Yeah.
Now, they know that both of those questions will be in the affirmative, because we have a third-party witness who basically blows their statements out of the water. And I am quite clear to detail where exactly the course of justice commenced in my allegation. So now they of course refused to give me that. Okay, so what I did then is I thought, well, what can I do now? So basically, I've got all this evidence. I know that I've got a case. I'm trying to get it recorded with Sussex Police. That they are all protecting their own. They will not record these allegations. And then I go to the Police Crime Commissioner's office and complain to them to say, because the role of the Police Crime Commissioner is to hold to account the Chief Constable of Sussex Police. And so I asked her to do exactly that. Told her, gave her some detail about my case, and the next thing you know is that they were initially interested, and then they come back to me and they say, "Oh well, we've had a full briefing by Sussex Police, and we're no longer able to assist you." Okay. Now, but the interesting thing is about that, I tried to establish what is it that they told them, because if anything that they've told them was outside of anything that occurred at the conference centre, then it has nothing to do with this case.
Yeah.
So, for example, the suggestion that I'd offered to supply a controlled drug to a colleague at work has nothing to do with this case. Nothing whatsoever, because it occurred. That was something that he believed had occurred some months ago. I totally deny that, by the way, and I wouldn't know where to get any drugs to give him if I.
That's
even
right.
if I could. But my point is that this unrecorded, undisclosed allegation was really the thing that was driving the investigation. Superintendent Bell, for example, who was the new head of our department, ex-head of professional standards department, made it quite clear that, probably she was the person who set the strategy, which said, under no circumstances is this bloke coming back to work in my office. That was quite clear, because that would explain why the investigation officer made not even one phone call to the conference centre to deal with the anomalies in the evidence, the allegations that officers were lying, etc., etc. Didn't speak to the witness. So as far as I was concerned, it became very clear to me from the beginning that there was a preordained narrative being carried out, which would result in my dismissal from the force. And of course, that's exactly what happened.
So real kick in the teeth, isn't it?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm talking a lot. I don't know if you wanted to interject with a question.
No, it's interesting. Sorry.
Whatever, but,
no, you continue. I was just saying.
I hope I've portrayed I've told the story. I don't want to get into the detail of the actual case because it's very complex. But I hope I've sort of given you an overview of what happened and how I feel a little bit miffed.
Of course, to say the least. Yeah. No, that is absolutely horrific, because, like we've said before, it's bad enough for someone of the general public to go through at the hands of the corruption.
That's exactly my point, because if they can do this to me, somebody who's got a certificate of exemplary service from the Metropolitan Police, then did another 7.5 years with Sussex Police, and then they all just turn on me and stab me in the heart. To me,
horrible.
If they can do that to me as an ex-officer, what chance has the public got? Think about it. And in some ways, Deborah, I do feel as well that if anything that I've said, and I have named names here, I'm
that's
aware.
Fine.
If there's anything I've said that's incorrect, or they think might amount to slander, well, let them bring it on.
Bring it on,
Because I've still got my docket, which is ready to go for investigation, and it might be worth adding here that. So Inspector Rachel Swinney was an inspector at the time. She, last I heard, was chief inspector, been promoted.
Lord.
We have the investigating officer, who was a chief inspector, Miles Ockwell. He's now a detective superintendent. We have Superintendent Lisa Bell. She's now superintendent in charge of Brighton. And then we had Superintendent Boniface, who was the head of PSD at that time, and my long-time supervisor, who's now the head of crime as a detective chief superintendent. So they've all done very well out of it. I'm not saying that we're all promoted on the back of this case, but that wouldn't surprise me in the least.
Really? Do you reckon?
Yeah, sure. As far as if you think about it, as far as the chief constable's concerned, his guys in the professional standards department have dealt with this matter, and it's gone away. So good for him, good for the reputation of the force. Not so good for me, obviously, but hey, I'm just a minor casualty. But my point is, I challenge any of these people, if they think I'm telling lies, to come and have a look at my evidence and tell me I'm wrong.
Absolutely.
And the thing is, if they were to take it to court for a slander case, I would produce my evidence, and then we could hear the case, because that's, to date, something they batted off successfully, and my case has never really been heard.
It's very much like bullies in the playground, where they all club together and say, that he was our friend, he's not anymore, let's get him.
Yeah, well, there's absolutely, that's absolutely how it seems, That's how it certainly feels to me. You see, the interesting thing is, Rachel, who was my then supervisor, it's a little unfortunate. I don't want to give personal details of what she was going through, but she went through a very difficult emotional period when she first came to our office, and was breaking down in tears. Dare I say, she got a bit fixated on occasions with things, but the point was, I didn't feel that she should have been back at work at that stage. She was emotionally vulnerable. She was still having breakdowns in the office, crying on the shoulder of some of the male colleagues in the office, and whilst we're all there and trying to be supportive, it was quite clear she was not ready to be back at work. And so there's a great argument to be made, I think, that some of this all stems from her emotional instability, and she decided to do something with her civilian colleague, which she knew was wrong, but having done it, instead of the force looking at that, and once it's been challenged, and instead of the force dealing with that, they chose to take her side and basically pursue it against me, perhaps based upon the undisclosed stuff I talked about earlier. That may have been the drive. Well, I'm pretty certain that it was the driving thing. If you think about it, what's the chances of a superintendent wanting somebody in their office who as far as they're aware, has offered to supply a Class A drug in the headquarters of the police of Lewis, Sussex Police headquarters. You can understand it. Hey, no questions asked. I think we all understand why this guy's got to go. Let's get rid of him. And that's kind of what happened, I think.
Oh my goodness!
Now, of course, I never had the allegation been put to me properly, as it. I'd have been entitled to, legal advice. I'd have been entitled to a solicitor, and it would have been done within the codes of practice that govern police interviews. But of course, because that allegation was never put to me formally, it was all just office gossip that somehow got into the evidential docket. It's sort of loosely slipped in there. It appears to have been given all the weight in the world by the investigating officer and the subsequent process, but in reality, there was no evidence, because there was no statement from this ex-colleague. No. And that's what's required in any evidential case. You need a statement from the witness, and of course he knew that it wasn't true what he'd said. As I said, I don't know if I mentioned earlier, but he was a bit of a Walter Mitty character. And there was actually no evidence to support the allegations, and of course, it's hard for me to sort of articulate that, because on one hand, there appears to be this disciplinary process that's being followed formally and correctly, but in actual fact, they're just paying lip service to it. It doesn't matter. I'm challenging the evidence. I'm calling some of your witnesses liars. Why aren't you looking into that? Don't worry about that. We'll make decisions about it at the end, But there hasn't been a full investigation, and your first principle of your disciplinary process says there will be no decisions on outcomes until there's been a full investigation, and there was never a full investigation. So the frustration for me, sitting there and watching things transpire during the process, knowing full well, they've already made their decision. Doesn't matter what I do or say. So yeah, very frustrating.
That must feel.
But equally, all of these people have failed to uphold the rule of law, and that's what I'm really more concerned about. I have no malice against them individually. They did what they did. Things transpired as they transpired, but ultimately they're still no less guilty for these offences than they were 6 years ago.
Yeah. But the horrible thing...
Regardless of whether they recorded the allegations of crime, of course, regardless. Because if you don't record the allegation of crime, you don't have an investigating officer. If you don't have an investigating officer, nothing gets investigated. Simple as that.
Do you know, I don't know if I mentioned to you, Roy, when we first spoke, that I was in town, I think it was before Christmas, and there was Debenhams has just shut down, and there were all these posters of, like, our heroes. You had a firefighter, a paramedic, I think it was a nurse, and then there was a police officer, and all this graffiti over and I thought, do you know what? That could have been people who have been guilty and just a bit bitter. But I thought at the same time, I just wanted to send that to our chief constable and say, what does this make you feel? What do you think? What reasons do you think could have been behind this? And it's just horrible, isn't it, to think that it must.
It is, and I think when you look historically at how things within the police developed over time. So pre-1984, you didn't have the codes of practice. So the Police and Criminal Evidence Act of 1984 brought out a code of practice that governs the conduct of interviews, essentially, amongst other things. And so there's certain rules to be adhered to. So if a police officer asks questions about a criminal matter, then the circumstances under which that interview takes place are quite clear. They're prescribed, and you should be given the access to independent legal advice. Should be given a copy of the codes of practice, and you should be allowed to have writing material, and you should have be allowed to have somebody informed of your arrest. These are all the things that happen when a person is arrested and booked in at a custody suite. Now, so during my first interview, and this is where during my very first interview, I was asked questions about what could potentially have been criminal offences outside of all that rule book. They didn't caution me. They didn't offer me independent legal advice. And so right there, I sort of challenged that and said, well, if you were going to ask me questions about a potential criminal matter, you have to offer me all of the protection and services that the codes of practice say you should offer me. You can't just decide to deal with these matters under the umbrella of a disciplinary process. You've got to adhere to the law. So if Joe Public gets arrested, that's what they're entitled to. But as a police officer, I was denied that facility.
Oh,
and so right there, that is perverting the course of justice. That simply alone. So the course of justice was in progress, and something happened that perverted the course of that justice. In other words, why wasn't I given my right to free independent legal advice? Why wasn't I cautioned? Why wasn't I given all the protection that PACE offers? And of course, these things I raised during the process, and they're just dismissed. They have no interest whatsoever in listening to anything I've got to say about anything, which again just supported my suspicion that this was a preordained narrative, and they were just going through the motions to get rid of me. And essentially, that's what they did.
It must feel like a bad dream.
So anyway, the good news is at least I'm not bitter and twisted.
That's good. Well, I'm amazed that you're not, because I don't know how I could. I mean, I feel bad enough about my own situation, but I just cannot get my head around what it must feel like for you.
Yeah, well, I haven't got a. I like to think I haven't got a massive ego, so the fact they say, oh well, they've ruined your what was a previously immaculate reputation. I'm not really interested in things like that. It means nothing to me in that sense. But what I am concerned about is the erosion of organisations such as the police, because if you for a moment give me the courtesy of accepting that these allegations I made are true, then you look at Sussex Police as an organisation. It's horrendous, actually.
Is it? Yeah.
Isn't it? 8 or so chief inspector or superintendent ranks, chief constable, all in key positions in charge of investigation of complaints against police, head of crime, this kind of thing. You know, these are not insignificant players within Sussex Police. They are key holders of key roles.
Yeah.
And that's what's disturbing for me, anyway.
Isn't it? Yes. It's not as if it's. Yeah, where'd you go to outside of that? It's just hard to.
Well, this is where do you go? And after the police crime, I did point out to the Police Crime Commissioner that if the Sussex Police have given you any information about this case that is outside of what occurred at the conference centre, then and they're using that as a basis for their to support their decision in sacking me. Well, right there, she is now involved in perverting the course of justice as well. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah,
because
right.
As soon as you cover up for somebody else, you're implicated. I mean, I know it sounds silly, but that's what tends to happen with these cases, and that's why, you know, I'm sure you've heard the old stories about the old territorial support group, the TSG, where, you know, apparently a carrier stopped a young black lad, searched him. It ended up he was assaulted by one of the officers, but then later they can't identify the carrier from which the officers were in, but a witness or a CCTV saw the index of the police carrier, and later these officers were identified, but none of them would put their hands up to who assaulted the kid on the street, and so they closed ranks. But what happens is, if one cracks, then one tells a lie, or you know, what you find is, before you know it, people are at each other's throats, and they make statements against each other, and want to, you know, claw back their own position, if you like. And this is the kind of thing that could easily happen here. You know, and so when I made my allegations, I said I believe I have a prima facie case against the investigating officer. Prima facie. Doesn't even need to be interviewed. There's enough evidence there to charge him right now. And of course, well, if that's true, had they recorded the allegation, they may well have done that. But because they failed to record the allegation, we never got to that point. Now. And it's round and round and round you go, you know. Yeah. This had happened, that would have happened, etc., etc., etc. But as I say, they all, to a greater or lesser degree, are up to their neck in it, really. But what do you do? So after you get a pushback from the Police Crime Commissioner, there is a crime panel that apparently oversees or scrutinises the work of the Police Crime Commissioner. I wrote to them, again, a dead-end street, couldn't really do anything about it.
Really?
Some say I could have opened a case with the OIPC. Well, I tried that, which is the essentially the external body that oversees more serious complaints against police. I approached them during the process, and all they did was refer me back to the local professional standards department, and of course, who's in charge of that? My old ex-supervisor, Mr. Boniface, and he decides he's not going to record the allegations. So the person, one of the people implicated in the allegations, is making a decision not to record the allegations, which may include him in the substance. Do you see what I'm saying?
Oh my goodness! It's like a bad dream.
It is a bad dream, you know, because however I tried to get redress, to get somebody just to listen to what I was saying, just once, you know, anybody, it was all pushed back. And the thing is, I mean, of course, I can speculate here, but if you're the head of the professional standards department, you will have a contact within the OIPC, because that's the nature of the game. Anything that's really serious, you might have to discuss with the OIPC. They might come back to you as the head with questions. So it's naive to think that there was not some communication between any of the heads of PSD, which we're going to deliberate on this case. And you know, although I have no proof of that, it seems to make sense, because the OIPC could have insisted, and I asked them to insist, that the local PSD record the allegations of crime, and they wouldn't do that. And yet it's quite clear in their in the guidelines under which they operate that they not only have the option to do that if they feel that an investigation should be carried out because of its seriousness. And believe me, perverting the course of justice is a serious offence as far as they're concerned. And I asked them to insist that they record them locally, and they refused to do that. Now, so again, the OIPC is supposed to be an independent body, but you've got to ask, well, why didn't they just do that? If they have no contact or no liaison with Sussex Police PSD, why wouldn't they just insist that they record it? And once that's done, it has to be investigated.
Yeah.
So the way that Sussex Police have got away with all of this, if you like, is that they've never recorded the allegations, any of them. And right there is the big problem.
So the IOPC really play sort of protective father to them all.
Say that again, sorry.
So the IOPC kind of just play protective father or protective big brother.
Well, I don't want to make general statements about them, but
I've wondered.
What I'm suggesting, though, is that, of course, from the public's perspective, the OIPC is independent of the police force. But in real terms, there is always a liaison between the OIPC and the head of PSD, or other officers within PSD. It's just the nature of the game. They have to consult and they have to discuss cases. And really, this could have been as simple as. This could have been as simple as somebody saying, "Look, this guy, he's a bit of a wrong, and look, if he phones you or comes in contact, you just pass it back to us, and we are dealing with it." And that's all it needs, really. And I have no evidence that that actually happened, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if that's what is exactly what happened. And nobody's ever going to admit that, of course. But knowing how the system works, I'm able to see. Well, I guess this probably happened. So, for example, the original superintendent, if she had, for example, decided that under no circumstances she wants this guy back in her office, even after the end of the tribunal. So let's be clear. I don't want him back. So you do everything. She could speak off record to her superintendent colleagues and say, look, I don't want him back, and you just do the necessary, make sure you don't come back. So essentially, that's how it felt to me. That's what they've done. They just failed to listen to anything I've said. They failed to deal with any of the anomalies in the evidence which I raised. They failed to deal with the fact that all the witnesses were drunk, and there was the chronology of the allegations was all wrong, and this general sort of apathy towards truth finding, basically. They weren't interested. They had no interest in finding out what really happened. They'd already made their mind up based upon other stuff that hadn't been disclosed to me. So
Do you know what? I think I'm just listening to all this and thinking. I mean, I can't speak for the average person, but I think your average decent person, their conscience would not allow them to do this.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. But it's hard for me to sort of comment on. But I kind of saw how it was going. I realised that it didn't matter what I said. They'd already made their mind up, and I was just, to some degree, collecting evidence as I went along, because I knew there was a case developing against all of these officers, and each one played out their part in the process. Each of them sort of jumped into the pool, if you like, and were involved as well. So anyway, subsequent to that, so when a couple of years later, when the role of police crime commissioner came up again, and I heard that they were changing the role so that they would have responsibility for the investigation of police complaints, I was motivated to apply for that. And so I ran as an independent, and although I didn't get it, I did quite well. I got over 30,000 votes, and I got my deposit back, which was the main thing. But had I been successful, I was certainly going to ask for a number of cases to be contentious cases to be revisited. And of course, I would have had the facility to employ officers within the PCC's office to take take sort of charge of that, and that would have been very useful, because then you truly are independent. Whereas the police investigating their own, I think my case alone demonstrates that Sussex Police do not and cannot police their own quite clearly, unless they decide you were wrong, and as they did with me, and it's quite easy. As I say, so the police crime commissioner role. From that, I wouldn't call it fame, but I became certainly known to a lot of people, and I was approached quite recently. I think it was August. Would I take on the role of chairman for a local residents association?
Oh yes,
where we basically look at the environment around us. We decide are there any issues we need to think about. For example, 5G masts, the rollout of telecom equipment nationwide without any apparent health or environmental impact assessments. It appealed to me. At least you're helping people. I think there is harm that can be caused through some of this technology, and it's not been acknowledged, and it's almost refuted.
It's
but
scary.
There is a lot of evidence to support the fact that people are being harmed. And so, anyway, I'm now chair of the association. I've been in it for about 4 months. It's really hard work in the sense that it's easy for me. I'm retired. I can go out and do stuff. I can speak to people. I can go out and do data readings. But for a lot of the people who are at work full time, that's not so easy. So it's a lot of work. I'm going to do it for at least another couple of months, and then I might try and hand it over, because I think organisations where the chair is in place for too long can become stale. I think you need new blood. But as I say, it's quite an interesting project. We're interested in looking at the 15-minute city proposals, which are going to come out nationwide. And again, these kind of rules and ideas, they essentially directly attack your right to travel.
Yes.
And some could say your right to freely assemble. It's definitely touching on both of those constitutional rights. And I'm not really a politician, but I seem to have got involved in some of this stuff just by the fact of running for the PCC. And I think people think I'm a politician, but I'm not. My knowledge in many areas is less than good, but
you don't come across that way.
Policing was my, if you like, my speciality. And people ask me, "Are you going to run next time which is 2 years' time for the PCC?" But I'll be 66 years old then. The thought of going back into a corporate organisation such as Sussex Police fills me with dread and horror.
It sounds like a nightmare.
It would be nice to give them the finger, so to speak.
Yeah.
And there'd be people twitching in there if I got it. I know that, but as I say, I mean, I don't bear these people malice. I just care about the principle of the rule of law rather than anything.
Yeah, of course.
Had some of my concerns been at least listened to, looked into, and they'd come to the same conclusion, I might have felt, well, at least I was at least given the impression that there was a genuine process taking place. But from my perspective, all that happened, they paid lip service to it and achieved their objective of getting rid of me. So
that's horrible.
Yeah,
absolutely
I suppose that's
horrible.
all I've got to say about it, really. And I know I sort of drip on about it, but it's been nice to be able to talk to somebody
it's interesting.
Somebody who's new to it and has never heard the story.
Well, it's interesting to hear all this, because it's, to speak to someone who's got inside knowledge of this. I mean, I'm just on the outside thinking, has this thing really happened to me? So it's interesting to hear. I mean, I'm very, very sad to hear about this.
Complaints by members of the public against officers for assault, this kind of stuff. If you can't have any confidence that they're above board, that they take these matters seriously, and that they're honest and have integrity, well, you might as well pack up and go home now. You know,
it's crazy.
You've got to have, if you've got an organisation or a body overlooking or overseeing police complaints, you need that body to have integrity.
Yeah.
And I think my story, it essentially blows that idea out of the water that there's any integrity. The fact that any one of these players in this process would engage knowingly with what was taking place, it's a really bad indictment for the senior management at Sussex Police. That's how I view it.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And it's just it's a brave thing for you to speak out. Do you think that is, to have such a heart of passion against something so unjust? Is it because it's like enough is enough?
Even after, prior to the tribunal, I was certainly under surveillance a couple of times in my local town centre.
Oh!
There was I knew the licensee at this pub in the High Street.
Oh.
I knew I was under surveillance because I knew one of the officers who was actually he was a retired officer, but he was now in charge of the counter-terrorist surveillance for Sussex Police, and I think he did training, and he was in there with a colleague, and there was another two. We were being watched, and I spoke to the licensee, and I said to her, look, you know the old bills in the house tonight, and she said, yeah, I know. I said, they're looking at me. Oh, she didn't know that, but I said, well, just to let you know, could I ask, could you possibly let me have the CCTV for this tonight?
Yeah,
no problem, I'll let you go. Pop round tomorrow or later in the week. I said, yeah, okay. So when I popped round later in the week, she said, the brewery have told her that that she's not allowed to give any CCTV to anybody other than the police. Now, right there, you could argue that's interfering with the course of justice, because my question would be, why am I under surveillance?
Yeah.
What is the authorisation for this covert surveillance? And they knew they were blown because I confronted the guy that I knew. What are you doing here? We've been playing football. No. You never come in here, Jim. I've been coming to this pub for years. I've never seen you in here. What are you doing here tonight? And anyway, long story short, their cover was blown. And then when I tried to get details from the local Nick as to why I was under surveillance, what was the authorisation, because you can't just go out and surveil somebody. There's a procedure. You have to apply. There has to be certain conditions in place. One of which is they are there to detect and prevent offences, and they have a clear idea of what those offences are. Now, I guess the idea was that perhaps they thought I was some sort of local dealer of some sort, which is just nonsense,
Yeah.
And I was under surveillance on at least another two occasions, which is quite disturbing.
It is.
And the thing is, when you've been in the job for so long and you know how they work, and then you realise I'm under surveillance, And so when I come home, I open the back door of my house, and I can hear a couple of police radios at the back of my fence, and I'm like, come on, what is going on here? So there's this almost sort of intimidation that's taking place in addition to the process that was ongoing. Yeah. And of course, I never got to the bottom of that. They never gave me any information. I couldn't get hold of the CCTV because apparently the rules had changed almost overnight. And I have no doubt whatsoever that somebody has told the brewery, don't release CCTV if anybody asks for it.
Oh my goodness, that's awful. I mean, it's
but they're all. Bear in mind, because bear in mind, the reality of the situation is that if that was an unauthorised surveillance, right? Well, who instigated that? And I've a pretty clear idea who did instigate it, but it doesn't matter for the purposes of this chat. But it was one of the officers I've named already, and. So, of course, you've got to understand that if any of these people were convicted, they're going to jail.
Yes.
Let's be clear what they're fighting for, their very freedom, in some sense. And the fact that they've also acted together in what they did, it makes it even worse.
Where's your freedom?
So this would be a horrendous, if ever this got to court, this would be horrendous for all who were charged, all.
Yeah.
I can't ever see that happening. But equally, I'm quite happy to come out and try to sort of speak openly about what happened to me, and if Sussex Police want to come back to me and challenge what I've said, well, great, bring it on. I have all the evidence I need.
Absolutely. Do you know what? I'm so proud of you. I am so proud of you because it takes.
I can tell you, it's not easy. But thank you. I do appreciate that, because it's felt for many years like a sort of a one-man uphill battle against the might and resources of the whole of Sussex Police and the Police Crime Commissioner, might I add.
And that's a hard thing to take on.
Horrible few years, but as I say, I don't hold malice. I think that's the worst thing you can do. Sometimes you just got to accept things, take it on the chin, and move on. Which is what I've done. So anyway, I mean, as I say, this interview today was we discussed what we might talk about, and I know we'd spoken about it on our previous chat, but it's been nice to be able to talk about it and articulate it. But as I say, I'm not doing it for any sinister reason. I'm not looking for financial reward. I'm not looking to sue the police financially. I'm just saying, there's a real problem with the rule of law in this country. And there's a little snippet of evidence to support that statement.
Absolutely, and it's speaking out about what's right. I've recently read a quote from Rosa Parks. it was something along the lines of "Never fear about speaking up against something that's wrong." It was something like that. And it's.
I think that's important, because people with integrity, they will speak up against these things, and there's lots of things. I mean, we're seeing it in the National Health Service at the moment, aren't we? Where more and more people are standing up and saying, "Well, no, I know this was wrong. I was coerced into it, or the environment was such that we dare not challenge things." This kind of thing. Well, it's great that people are starting to do this, and that's kind of how I feel. I feel like, in some sense, I'm the whistleblower. And that I've blown the whistle, so there it is. I don't fear these people in the sense of if they could come here with a warrant to turn this address over for whatever spurious reason, well, bring it on. I've got nothing to hide.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? I have the evidence to support my allegations. I'm confident that they would be successful prosecutions were people charged, and yet. An allegation of crime was never recorded, so there it ends.
Oh well, we just hope and pray that justice will be served in some form, and it just is hang on in there. And it's been great to chat with you, Roy. Thank you so much for sharing about all this.
Really Thank you for the opportunity to sort of tell my story, I guess.
Oh no, it's just an eye opener. It's just incredible, isn't it? I've been sat here with my mouth open for most of this is just I don't know, speechless. But your heart of courage and passion is just wonderful.
Yeah. Well, I try not to think of things in those terms. I just think, well, is this the right thing to do? I mean,
yes.
You got me on today just to talk about this. Is this the right thing to do? And I think, well,
it
is the right thing to do. And whilst I feel, if something was to happen to any of these officers for whatever reason, in terms of in relation to what I've said today, all I would say is, well, you knew exactly what you were doing.
Yeah.
This is not something I'm bringing on you. This is something you brought on yourself.
Well, you reap what you sow, don't you? I think we reap what we sow in life, and I think it's
absolutely right. Yeah,
so
and all I'm doing is telling my truth. And if people believe it, they believe it. If they don't, well, that's up to them. But it's still my truth, and it's the truth that it's my, if you like, my sense of integrity that allows me to tell that truth. I'm not dressing it up. I'm not making it any worse than it was. I'm just telling it how it is from my perspective. And if people don't like that, well,
it's tough, isn't it? That's the thing, isn't it?
Give me my day in court, which is what I've always asked for from the beginning.
Yeah. No, there's nothing wrong with speaking the truth, and it's absolutely, and it's the right thing to do, isn't it? It's
yes, absolutely.
It's not. Yeah. Oh, thank you so much again, and also to the listeners for tuning in, and I hope this is a blessing and a help. And until next time, lots of love and God bless.